Hey now folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and it's time for another one of my fabulous top 10 lists. And well, okay, I don't know if they're that fabulous, but by popular demand, this one is going to be a little bit shorter than my other ones. Or really, the real reason it's going to be shorter is because this is more of a lead-in to another couple of lists that I have in mind. And what is this top 10 list? Well, in case you didn't read the title of this video, I don't know why you wouldn't, or you just couldn't make sense of it because it is one of the wonkiest titles I've ever had for any of my videos. This is basically my top 10 list of the licensed intellectual properties that I think should be made into good board games, which I know it's kind of a crazy title, but just picture it this way. You know, we're geeks. If you're watching this, you're probably a geek in some way, shape, or form, and we like a lot of different types of media, whether it's books, movies, comic books, anime, you know, different TV shows, all kinds of different things. And we're board gamers too, so it makes sense that we would want to see some of our favorite different properties hit the table in some way, shape, or form. And you're seeing more and more of this lately. Well, actually, you've seen it for a very long time, but you're seeing more and more good board games with licenses on them. For instance, Battlestar Galactica. I haven't played the Firefly game, but I've heard that it's quite good, and there's another Firefly card game coming out soon as well. BioShock Infinite, The Siege of Columbia I have on my shelf. That's a good game. All kinds of different games are coming out with a higher standard of quality towards being faithful to the property in question and having that integrate very well with the mechanics of a board game or card game or whatever it might be. So you're seeing this trend continue, and here are some of my favorite properties I would love to see follow in the footsteps of those other kinds of properties. So a couple little caveats. Like I said, this is just going to be a quick one, but also you're going to notice a distinct lack of comic books on my list, and I thought about it, and you know, my comic book heyday is pretty much past me. I don't even read that much manga anymore, which is pretty much what I gave up comic books for. But if I feel like everything's been touched on as far as major comic book franchises. You have Walking Dead games, you have all kinds of Marvel games, you have DC games, and there's just not a lot of other comic books that I like enough that I think would make good board games. That's kind of another caveat of this list, is that I didn't just choose things that I like. I like hundreds of different types of anime and movies and books and things like that, but whether or not they would actually make a good transition to a board game is a whole different matter altogether. I mean, there's a lot of very character-centric, character-focused storylines that I like in various pieces of media that just wouldn't translate very well to a board or card game. I mean, how could they? Board game is supposed to be about a group experience, so if one player is controlling your favorite character, what do the other people do? This is what the Flip the Table cast would call the Optimus Prime conundrum, where in the original Transformers board game, everyone played Optimus Prime. So that game had a lot of other problems, but that's kind of my point. So I tried to pick properties that I think everyone could participate in and it would actually make sense with the storyline. And hopefully everything I just said made sense. But nevertheless, I promise this will be quick, so let's go ahead and get right to my number 10. My number 10 is a series of books written by William F. Wu, but inspired by the science fiction work of Isaac Asimov, and that is Robots in Time. Now, I say this was inspired by Isaac Asimov because it uses the same rules for robotics that Asimov created in his books, and this was actually, I believe, the very first work published after Asimov's death that was officially licensed to use his name and his different characteristics of his universe. And this was actually written for young adults. This is probably why I was reading it back in junior high or grade school, but I didn't really realize that at the time. It seemed pretty complex for what I was reading. But basically what this is, the series takes place in the future, obviously, where the world is there are these robots called governors that rule different cities on the planet, like really highly advanced artificial intelligences, and they're actually split up into 6 different parts. Each different part of this governor robot takes control of a different section of the city. And these robots start to fail at a certain point for some mysterious reason. One of these robots in the midst of him realizing that he's going to fail, he sort of glitches and follows one of the rules of robotics, which is to protect your own existence no matter what, as long as it doesn't conflict with the other 2 laws. So he actually uses sci-fi technology and goes back in time. All 6 parts of him go back in time to different time periods, hence there's 6 books in the series. And a What the problem with this, other than the obvious of going back and changing the timeline, is that by going back in time, the molecular structure of these robots has changed, and if the robot survives up into the point where he actually is in the future and survives to the point where he would have jumped back in time, a nuclear explosion occurs from the robot. I hope that made sense. But what basically happens is that a team of scientists and a good robot, they're all good, I guess, have to go back in time to all these different time periods and track down these robots, deactivate them, take them back to the future, back to the present, and solve it. But I think this is a really good cooperative board game in the making. I think that there still has yet to be a good time travel board game, although a couple have been sort of innovative, but I think this could have the potential to be a good cooperative one. I mean, each person plays a different team member that has a different specialty, a la Pandemic, and each scenario, or maybe even with different expansions, you go to these different time periods ranging from World War II to the Cretaceous period and to the feudal Japan, and you have to try to track down using investigative clues and such to find out where these parts of the robots are, and at the same time you're trying to not change history, so there could be some sort of like mechanic for too much entropy being caused or something like that to the timeline and make sure that doesn't get out of whack, or then you have to deal with the locals in some way. I think there's a lot of potential there. I liked the book series a lot. I think it was underrated. I am scared to read it now because maybe I'm totally wrong, but the idea is really cool. That's Isaac Asimov's Robots in Time by William F. Wu, my number 10 property that should be a board game. My number 9 is the first but not last anime on my list, and that is Code Geass Lelouch of the Rebellion from Bandai Entertainment, I believe. This is an awesome anime series. I really love it, where it's an alternate history of our world, where the British were forced during one of the Great Wars or whatever they were having with France or something. I don't know history very well. The British were forced to actually retreat to the Americas before the American Revolution, and consequently they took over America. There was no American Revolution. The royal family of Britain just took control. And fast forward to the present day, the Holy Empire of Britannia has spread out over most of the world and conquered most of it. They never got rid of their imperialistic tendencies. And of course, it's an anime, so there's mecha involved, and so they've developed these things called nightmare frames to subjugate the different populaces, and each part of the world that they conquer is absorbed into the Holy Empire of Britannia and just becomes a number called like Area 11 is what Japan is called, and that's sort of the focal point of the anime, is that there's a resistance in Japan more than any of the other territories that they've conquered, and at the same time there's this son, a prince of the Holy Britannian Empire, who was in self-imposed exile, who decides to get, for various reasons I won't get into, but he decides to get revenge on the Empire by taking on the secret identity of Zero and leading a group of the Japanese resistance to try to actually take down the Britannia Empire. And at the same time, you've got different places in the world that are still not underneath Britannia's control, like I think in like China and Australia. So I think there's a lot of potential here for like some sort of world domination game, but better than Risk. I hope that's not the first thing you thought of, but where each player either takes control of a different faction, like Britannia, or like Lelouch, the title character, and his secret identity is called Zero. So in his faction is called the Black Knights. That's the terrorist organization he leads. So you could either have Zero and his Black Knights as another faction that a player takes control of, or as like some sort of random chaotic element, like how in the BioShock game you have Booker and Elizabeth who just sort of go around and create havoc amongst the players who are the evil forces. So you could have one person be Britannia, you could have one person be like the other world powers like China and all that. I think that'd be really cool. You could even do a Fortress America type thing where it's Britannia against everyone else, including the Black Knights. I just think there's some potential there because unlike a lot of different animes, I mean, it is very character-centric, but it also has an epic global feel, which a lot of other animes don't, especially, and it also has a very historical feel. So I think there's potential there, and I just want more of that show in any way I can get. So Code Geass Lelouch of the Rebellion, my number 9 licensed property that should be a board game. Number 8 was given away by my shirt. The Mass Effect series of video games are long overdue for some sort of board game adaptation. We have Bioshock Infinite, we're having The Witcher come out. How do we not have a Mass Effect board game yet? Okay, I know what you're about to say too, because if you don't know it already, you're probably going to go to Board Game Geek or just Google Mass Effect board game, and you're going to see the Risk board game that just came out. Doesn't count, doesn't count. There's a Risk board game for everything, okay? Everything, all right? One of my dogs probably has a Risk board game created about them. I guarantee it. Anyways, so that doesn't count. There needs to be an actual, real Mass Effect board game that takes into account the entire lore of the series, which I'm not going to go into. If you don't know about Mass Effect, just Wikipedia it. It's a fantastic, epic sci-fi adventure game that takes place over, there's 3 main games out, and the decisions you have in one carry over into the others, which would make the perfect type of probably cooperative board game similar to Descent, where the decisions that you have carry over through like a campaign mode, or Mice and Mystics does that as well, and that would be an awesome way to go about it. There was a game that just came out on Kickstarter within the past year. I think it was just released at retail, called Galaxy Defenders, which had the same sort of sci-fi theme where you're leading a squad, so you could have a squad-based co-op mechanic. You could even do a competitive game where you're playing different factions. One person could be the Reapers, one person could be the Alliance. You could be different alien races. It doesn't have to strictly adhere to the storyline of the 3 games. It could just take place in the same universe as long as it's still thematically tied to it. So a lot of potential there. This is probably the one that's most likely to be made into a board game someday, and I hope sooner rather than later. Mass Effect, my number 8. There are a lot of horror-themed board games nowadays. Some of them are like A Touch of Evil, which is very Ameritrashy, sort of light dice-rolling mechanics. I think it's a terrible, overrated game. That's going out to you, Secret Cabal guys. On the other end of that spectrum is the Eldritch Horrors and Arkham Horrors and Mansions of Madness game based off the Cthulhu mythos, which I like those games a lot, but they are very heavy, they are very long, and they're not everyone's cup of tea. It can be very hard to get those to the table with certain groups of gamers. I think there's a middle ground here to be had, and I think that niche can be filled by Supernatural, the board game, based off of the TV show. That's my number 7. And I love this show a lot. I can't always defend it because it can be rather cheesy at times, and certainly a lot of its popularity and its longevity is due to its 2 leading stars who are just sort of like hunks that a lot of fangirls fawn over. But there is a good story there, and there's a lot of different factions, and there's a lot of different interesting powers and magic going on in the game. I think that would make an awesome translation to a board game. You could take the same sort of framework of A Touch of Evil, where you have individual characters who are competing to defeat a certain monster, and they call those Monster of the Week shows like that, and Buffy and Angel. So you can take those elements, but you can make it better. You can make it more thinky, more brain-burning, more investigative. You can take one of the elements that I also liked about Touch of Evil is that you can do different modes: full cooperative mode, full competitive mode, team mode. I would like to see that implemented, but I would just like to see more of an emphasis on the characters, more of an emphasis on the storytelling. You can have different scenarios where it's not just that you're fighting a different monster, but that something different happens. Maybe one of the brothers, Sam and Dean, is possessed by a demon, and you have to take care of that. And just all of these different things that could happen to make it just a very thematic game, whether it's cooperative or not. I think there's a potential there. This is another one that Supernatural is still a hot show, and I think this is easily one that Gale Force 9, who licenses a lot of different TV shows, should look into for sure, because there is a fan base here. There's a lot of crossover between the type of people that would play modern board games and watch that show. Supernatural, my number 7. There's an author whose name I'm going to butcher, but I'll say it anyways, China Miéville, who wrote a series of books based in a fictional universe called Bas-Lag. And most of the books centered around a city called New Crobazone. And the first book of that series, and probably therefore the most well-known, is called Perdido Street Station. The other 2 books are called The Scar and The Iron Council. Now, these are very character-driven books, and they're also very idealistic books. I don't mean idealistic. What I mean is that there's a lot of social commentary and politics hidden beneath the veneer of the plot of the story. And there's a lot to that I just don't have time to explain, but basically it's a world that mixes magic with steampunk in a very sort of industrial revolution type, grimy, seedy, dark type of world, but with very interesting characters, very interesting races. There's like cactus people called Cacticay or something. There's like beetle people. There's all kinds of cool things. There's magic mixed. I mean, there's vampires and there's steampunk elements and cool machinery. It's just a very cool, awesome theme. And I think it would make an excellent sort of area control game. I think of this, I think Eurogame. Of all the properties I'm going to mention on this list, this is one of the ones I think would definitely, the theme would do very, very well on a Euro-type area control game. And I always think of this series whenever I see a Kickstarter for a steampunk-inspired game, and I'm like, wow, I mean, someone's missing an opportunity here. Now, the sad thing is that Mr. Meeville, or however you pronounce his name, is a very hardcore socialist, anti-capitalist. It's very unlikely he would want any of his novelizations to be licensed and made into a product, but I'm holding out hope that he's a gamer because I think that more people need to be exposed to this world, which is not always pretty and is definitely not for kids, but is very, very innovative and interesting and tells a fantastic story. So the Books of China Miéville's Bas-Lag Universe, that is my number 6. Alright, the next anime on my list, I guess I just gave away there's probably going to be another one after this, but the next anime on my list is D.Gray-man, which you might not have heard of because it's not as popular as some of the other shonen-type anime that have come out in the last decade. And when I say shonen-type anime, it's an anime that features characters who have escalating power levels and fight a lot. Is basically it. But the reason I like D.Gray-man so much is because it's actually very dark compared to a lot of those. And when you watch series like, I think the most popular shonen series would be like Dragon Ball Z or Bleach, you know, the heroes have some setbacks, but most of the time they just get strong enough and then they wail on whoever the bad guy is. And if people die, they come back right away, or they don't really die, and things like that. In D.Gray-man, some very dark, brutal stuff happens. Sometimes they're guilty of those tropes, like characters not staying dead, but for the most part the heroes suffer a lot of setbacks, and when they win they have to sacrifice a lot, and it gets really, really hard. And the basic story of the show, it takes place in like the 19th century, and there's this evil like being called the Millennium Earl, really weird looking penguin type guy, who is creating these Akuma out of the deceased loved ones of people around the world. These like monstrous, like techno-organic steampunk demons, basically, that go on and kill more humans. And there are these items called innocents that are supposedly left by God that can they're like these magical artifacts that can attune to certain people and transform into like really powerful weapons. And these are the only things that can not only defeat the Akuma, but also like cleanse the souls of the people that are trapped inside of them. So there's this order called the Black Order that sends out these agents who can use the innocents to defeat these Akuma and stop the Millennium Earl. And the main character of the show, Alan Walker, is born with an innocence in his arm, and it's all very, very cool. I really love the show a lot. And I wish it would. I don't think they filmed any more of the anime in a very long time, but the manga went on and I think it ended, so I do have to catch up with that. But I think of this series, it screams Ghost Stories to me. Ghost Stories is one of my favorite hard cooperative games where there's a group of Shaolin monks or something who are trying to defend a town that is being besieged by ghosts on all sides. I can automatically see that game being rethemed with D.Gray-man. Each player gets a different one of the exorcists, which is what they call the agents in the show, and they each have a different special power based on the innocence that they have, and they're trying to defend off some vital location from waves of Akuma, who also level up and they get stronger and they have different versions, but you can level up as well and your innocence grows, just like in the show. It has all the elements and trappings necessary to make a great game, probably cooperative, but maybe even like a one versus all game or team game. I would love to see a horror anime themed game based off this property. That's D.Gray-man, my number 5. final anime, I swear, on my list is one that has actually had a game, or maybe even a couple of games based off of it, like card games and deck building games that were only available in Japan. But putting all that aside, it is criminal that this anime has not been made into a miniatures game of some way, shape, or form. And you probably already know what I'm going to say. Sailor Moon. No, Mobile Suit Gundam. How is that not already on Kickstarter making $2 million? They made one for Robotech, which is fine. That was probably long overdue as well. But I think Mobile Suit Gundam, with, you know, I'm talking based off of the main Mobile Suit franchise, because that probably is more palatable to board gamers who aren't into that anime theme, and the Gundams don't look as crazy. Like in Mobile Suit, was it Gundam G? Anyways, let's not even talk about that. But the Mobile Suit Gundam would just be an awesome, incredible tactical miniatures game. It would probably be, you know, 2 players, like most miniatures, like hardcore miniatures games like War Machine and things like that, where one player would be the side of the, I think they call them the Earth Federation, and you would have the Gundams, and the other side would be Xeon, and they would have their battle mechs, and oh man, it would be so cool. The miniatures and models would just be amazing. If you don't know the story of Gundam, it's pretty basic. It's just colonies rebelling against the Earth Federation in the future, and they have this experimental Mobile Suit Gundam, the giant mecha. Very, very cool. I don't imagine it'd be that thematic because, I mean, the storyline of that series wasn't all that great anyways. It was just about the mecha. And but still, I think it would just be an awesome looking game. And I mean, definitely, I think Battletech has yet to make the resurgence that it probably should have by now, and I think this has more theme than that at least, and could definitely fill that void. So, Mobile Suit Gundam, easily my number 4. Number 3 is the second video game on my list, and even though I love this series, I'm probably mispronouncing the name, but it's either pronounced Suikoden or Suikoden, Chinese word. Anyways, this was a fantastic series of video games that sort of faded into obscurity, but it started off on the original PlayStation, had a couple of games there, including Suikoden 2, which was, it is one of my favorite games. It's probably my number 2 video game of all time. It's definitely in the top 5. Such a wonderful game. They had a few more installments on the PlayStation 2, and then I think they maybe even did a mobile game at some point, but I don't think they ever did anything for the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 or anything like that. But it's sort of an old school JRPG where you have a team and you're going through, and you know, it's a top-down view, and you're trying to the thing about it is there's a couple of unique elements. Even though it follows some of the same RPG tropes of, you get, you know, your main character is like this plucky young person who gathers together a team of adventurers and goes off and defeats some evil force trying to conquer the nation. First off, unlike games like in the Final Fantasy series, every Suikoden takes place in the same world, the same timeline, sequentially, sometimes with overlapping characters that appear in future games, which at the time blew my mind. I couldn't imagine it. That was so cool. But there's an even better, more addictive aspect to this game, and that's it. I haven't played every single Suikoden game, but in most of the main entries, you're not just gathering a team together. You're building a base. It could be a castle, it could be a town, it could be whatever, but you actually have to, you take your team and you find this base and try to raise an army in order to face off against whatever evil force you're trying to defeat. And you actually have to go out and populate your castle or town or wherever it is with people that you meet on your travels. Some of them become people that join your party and can go and fight with you, but when you don't have them in your party, they hang out in the castle and you can talk to them. Some are people that just sit there and they become like shops in your castle, or they become, you can play games with them. Or there's one in Suikoden 2, one of them is a chef that you could do like a Iron Chef type cooking contest with. There's just so much fun stuff, but I think that we're in a period of time where there's a lot of different board games coming out that are based off of city building and world building and civilization building. I mean, those have always been around, but it seems like with the advent of Suburbia and the new version of Civilization and now Nations, that's becoming more to the forefront. And I would love to see a game where of Suikoden, which it wouldn't really hold true to the series that much in like actually the RPG sense of it, but where you are recruiting adventurers and using them to populate your castle or town and getting bigger and stronger, and the person who can complete and get to like a certain margin of victory points or whatever becomes the leader of you all, and you go off and defeat the big bad enemy force. Whatever the theme is that you want to say, I would just love the idea of using these thematic sort of video game anime themed characters to populate a castle. Whichever one you do gives different sort of abilities to you. I can imagine a stack of cards as big as the characters from Bruges, Stefan Feld's recent game, having that many different options. Oh man, it would just be so cool. I don't care what the board game is or what the theme is. I want to see more Suikoden on my table. That's as simple as it is. So my number 3, the Suikoden video game series from Konami, I believe. Now, I am not as big a fan of the sci-fi genre as I am of the fantasy genre, or even modern day like monster hunting, like World of Darkness type stuff. But there is one science fiction series that is my absolute favorite. It is not Star Trek. It is not Star Wars. Those are both fine in their own ways. But one of them easily surpasses both of them in terms of storytelling and fiction and universe. And it is criminally underrated to this day, except for those people who are in the know, and that is Babylon 5. This was the greatest science fiction television series ever. It's probably better than most science fiction movies that I've seen, even taken episode by episode. It is a phenomenal 5-year-long series. Please forget the awful series spinoff that came after it. Just please. But the core series is awesome. You have this space station with all these different alien races, and these alien races, it's like a diplomatic station, so these factions are constantly warring and having to be forced to have diplomacy between each other. And in the meantime, there's this giant galactic war on the horizon with these evil shadow entities. And I think this would be a fantastic sort of game of both negotiation and territory control, and trying to either conquer or subjugate or make alliances with the other factions, taking elements of games like diplomacy, Game of Thrones, where there's not a lot of luck involved, but there's a ton of negotiation and just trying to have to meet whatever your particular goal might be. And maybe have secret objectives. So your alien race that you take control of might want to conquer and subjugate as many people as possible, but another alien race like the Minbari might just want peace or to meet some certain goal and have their like chosen one resurrected. Or I'm struggling to remember some of the details of the show. Or if you're the Narns, all you want to do is rebuild your civilization and your culture, things like that. Ah, man, there's so many possibilities here to be a heavy civilization negotiation type game. I know there was another type of either board game or war game with the Babylon 5 name slapped on it, but I haven't tried it. It's got horrible reviews. I'd be scared to try it. But now, after years of having good licensed board games come out, I think it's time for another try. Babylon 5, easily my number 2, could have been my number 1. Alright, we are to my number 1 licensed property that should be made into a good board game, and this property and my love for it is one of the few things outside of board games that Tom Vassell and I actually are in agreement on as being our favorite video game, and that is Final Fantasy Tactics from Squaresoft, or whatever they're calling themselves nowadays, Square Enix. It was Squaresoft when this game came out, damn it. But anyways, this is nominally set in sort of the Final Fantasy theme and setting, but it's in obviously, like every Final Fantasy, it's in a whole different world. This one is of Ivalice, and this was a tactical, strategic RPG where it basically the whole game was just going from battle to battle. There was no like you roaming around a town. You could go back to town to buy stuff, but it was just a bunch of menus. The game was, every chapter of the game was just a different battle. And it was like just a grid where you have different units. I think you were allowed to have 5 units in the game. It's been a while since I played it, but you had, your units could either be characters that you were came to you from part of the storyline, like your main character and other characters that you met, or you could make units from scratch using this really innovative job system where you'd have 2 branching paths. You could either start off as a squire or an alchemist, and then as you gain levels, you can unlock, if you took the squire path, you can unlock the knight path, and then the monk and the archer. If you took the alchemist path, you can unlock white mages, black mages, time mages, all kinds of crazy things. And then you can mix and match. If you had levels of one type of class and levels of like a melee class or a fighting class, and had levels of a magic class, you can unlock crazy combinations down the line, like a bard and like samurai. And there's just so many cool aspects of this game that a lot of other games have mimicked after this point. And there were probably some games before it that did these sort of things, but man, it just really came together. But even more than that, the storyline of that game is awesome. The first version of the game had a really awful localization as far as the translation of all the different texts in the game. But it's a testament to how good the storyline was that I kind of didn't even pay attention to that. Awesome, epic storyline, awesome gameplay, and it would so lend itself to a good board game. I mean, I see it all the time. I've already seen it with Crossmaster Arena, which is back on my shelf. The same type of feel I got from Final Fantasy Tactics is on Crossmaster Arena, and I'm blanking, but I could probably think of a bunch of other ones that have that same sort of tactical miniatures gameplay. I would love to see all of my favorite characters from that game in miniatures form. There was a Kickstarter for a game called Grand Tactics, which was clearly inspired by Final Fantasy Tactics, that I thought would be a fantastic game, but after 2 attempts, it's failed on Kickstarter both times, which is really sad. I don't think this is, even though it's my number 1, it's probably a long shot. It will never happen. But let me tell you, there is really not an amount of money I would not pay to have a board game version of this that has the same feel of the original Final Fantasy Tactics. I don't care if it's cooperative. I don't care if it's competitive. If you have those characters with that type of campaign-driven story mode, and you have the different job classes and being able to level up your guys and put them in different unique spots and classes, oh man, the possibilities are endless. My number 1 favorite video game, the number 1 potentially good licensed property I can think of, Final Fantasy Tactics from Square or whatever. Well, that's it for this list. I hope I didn't go on too long. I promised this would be quick, and I don't think it ended up being quick, but nevertheless, I could have gone on and on and on about all kinds of other properties and types of media that I really enjoy, but those are the ones that immediately popped into my head, and I really genuinely want to know what you think. Please comment or email me and let me know what properties you want to see made into a board game. What's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite video game? What's your favorite anime that you want to see on the table? You want to take control of those characters or those factions, and you want to go through these storylines and actually live them out, because that's the beauty of board games. It is more hands-on than a video game. You're actually it feels like you're taking control of your characters if they do it right. And I think that we're seeing more and more good licensed properties, so who knows, maybe your favorite will one day be a fantastic board or card game. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.